Oh, that's very zoomed in. Hello. I don't know why it crops in so much like that. I'm not into that. How do I... No. So, I heard you were wanting to get an autism assessment. Let's figure out if that's the best thing for you. So I thought I would make a video on getting an autism diagnosis because I only recently just got mine a couple of months ago and I've had lots of questions on it. I guess because it's quite unusual for some people to get diagnosed when they're like 22. But yeah, I just thought I would share. So background on me, I have grown up my whole life not knowing I'm autistic. It messes with your head. It really, really does. I never necessarily thought about being autistic. A lot of the time, autism in the media is a very, very specific type of autism, and I was like, well, I can talk to people, so like, I'm probably not autistic. Obviously not noticing or realising that I've been masking my entire life. And I just thought everyone else was masking as well. I thought it was just a thing that people did and it was part of just being a human, is that you're not actually yourself at any time. You're just a million versions of what you think the people around you will be okay with. You become digestible for that group of people. And yeah, I just kind of thought it was normal. One of my friends at university actually recommended that I look into autism because she could see how much I was kind of struggling with things, and she just thought the things that I struggled with really, really were lining up with autism. I started looking into autism and more specifically how it presents in women or people who are female at birth, or, you know, just kind of like people who are socialized as girls, and how it can present differently. And I was really like, this is me. So yeah, I started to look into it and I was kind of mind blown because I was like, holy shit, this explains literally my whole life. Okay, that's fine. I just felt so much relief because I've literally been trying to analyse what is wrong with me for my whole life. I would have kind of crossovers with mental illness stuff, but it wouldn't necessarily explain everything I was experiencing, and so I was just thinking I was crazy, like there was no one like me, no one thinks like me, and like, yeah. Basically, I was on a big fucking ego trip. I mean, it was in the worst way of like, you suck, you're so wrong. But it was like, no one's like you, there's never gonna be anyone like you, and you'll never connect with anyone because you're so weird. And now I'm like, oh, I'm just autistic. Cool. Getting a diagnosis, sis. So what is the actual testing, assessment, diagnosis process? What is it like? So for me, it was split into 3 stages. The first stage, I filled out a bunch of questionnaires that were very, very long. And they're always such difficult questions where it's like, I don't know what you mean. Like, they'll just be so vague, or it's like, I don't even know how the answers you're giving me would apply to this situation. They're very confusing. So you have the first round, and then I sent that off to the people who were doing my diagnosis, and they would kind of see if they thought I would be a good candidate to go in for the assessment. Then I got that back and they decided I should go into the second round, which was like an hour to 2 hour long interview just about everything in my life. And anytime I've thought that autism has maybe presented itself, but also just kind of general background on me. They just kind of want to know you as an individual. From being a child up until now, all of your relationships with other people, any health issues you've had. And then in round 3 was the actual assessment, where they do all of the different tests to see how your brain works and processes information. And they also have interviews with you then. I did this over Zoom, which I assume is going to be the protocol for a lot of places now. One, because I think it is just a lot more convenient to not have to leave your home. Two, I think it's so much better for autistic people to be able to be in their safe environment. Like, if I had to travel to have my assessment, just traveling would have really stressed me out and maybe like thrown me off quite a lot. Because the assessment is very mentally intense. Like, you're working your brain as hard as you can and trying as hard as you can, and also trying hard to like hold your attention. You're talking to a new person. It is quite a lot. So waiting times, what are the waiting times like to get an assessment? Well, that really depends on whether you're going privately or on the NHS. For the NHS, it really depends on where you are, obviously, like what borough you're in, what county you're in, but it takes a really long time. Like, we're talking years kind of thing. And that was before COVID. And so COVID has really backed up a lot of the system. If you go privately, you will be seen a lot faster, but it is still a long process. It took me about 6 months from start to finish. Another thing with going privately is that you can choose who you go to and make sure that the testing they are doing is something that you feel like would actually be beneficial to you and actually have a full profile of you, because the NHS testing isn't that comprehensive, and so it means a lot of people will leave it being told they're not autistic even though they are, because they're not presenting with the more stereotypical like male autism. Not to have gendered autisms, but you know what I mean. I say that because a lot of research that has been done on autistic individuals has been done on men, and it hasn't really necessarily looked into the masking side of things. And so a lot of the testing systems are quite outdated in that respect, because they'll think if you can talk to someone and you can have a conversation with them that you're not autistic, which is just so far from the truth. So if you want to go privately to get your diagnosis and you can afford to, I would personally recommend it. It's what I did, because I didn't have the time to wait to get the diagnosis. I really wanted to make sure I got it within the time that I was in university, so I could get the extra help that I need to study, because I do really struggle. If you are wanting to go privately and can't afford it, there are funds that are set up. One I can think of is Black and ND, which is set up by Autistic Tyler, who is also here on YouTube, and her videos are really great. So I'll link that down below. If I find any more, I'll try and link them. Healthcare should not be something that you can only access if you have the money to do it. So if you're wanting to go privately, how much is it going to cost? It is not cheap. It's not. I mean, anything private healthcare is obviously incredibly expensive. It really does depend. It can range between 600 to 2,000 plus pounds. Yeah. It's a lot. It really does depend on who you go to. So the people who I went to were really good, and they did the first kind of couple of stages for free, and then if I was autistic, which I was, then I would have to pay to have the report. What are the pros and cons of getting an autism assessment? First up is the negatives. So what are the negatives of getting an assessment? The first would be wait times. Whether or not you go privately or on the NHS, you are going to have to wait a long time, and it will be a long process. Even just the process itself takes a very long time. I think I probably spent a minimum 6 hours in the total assessment process, and that's not including the like writing emails back and forth with people, which might not seem like a big thing to a lot of people, but for me, it all takes quite a bit of time. The second thing would be cost. Obviously, you don't have to go privately, but like I say, if you go on the NHS, you might not actually get an accurate answer to whether or not you are autistic, because the testing isn't as comprehensive as some other places. Another con of getting a diagnosis is that it can be quite emotional and upsetting. Like, I did find it quite emotionally draining, as well as very freeing and liberating, but it does take out of you emotionally, and especially if you're having to recall like quite traumatic stuff that's happened to you growing up or stuff like that, it can be quite a lot. Another thing that can be quite upsetting with getting a diagnosis is I think it's really easy to just like pin all of your hopes on people around you magically now understanding you and how your brain works and how you perceive things because you have this diagnosis, which isn't necessarily going to be the case. And for a lot of people, unfortunately, even if you get a diagnosis, that doesn't even necessarily mean that people will believe that you are autistic. If you present in a certain way where you can talk to people and kind of function, then there are always going to be people who tell you that you're not autistic, really unfortunately. And obviously it's their ignorance that leads them to have that idea, but that can be quite upsetting because I just think I thought everyone would just get me now, and they still don't, and it can feel a bit isolating. As well, I think it can kind of put you in a mental space where you're acutely aware of your autism and any autistic traits that you might have, especially when you're in the diagnostic process, because you're trying to remember things and recall everything so that you can tell this person and basically prove to them that you're autistic. And so during that like 6 months and a long time before that, because I'd wanted to get a diagnosis for about a year before that, it was like quite intense to just have to constantly analyze how I was different or perceiving the world differently to neurotypical people. Now for the positive smiley face. Oh. So now we've spoken about the possible negative side of getting a diagnosis. What are the positives and why should you pursue it? So first of all, I think just generally understanding yourself more is really, really great and valuable. It was really helpful for me to get a full report of the things that I struggle with, things that I'm more sensitive to. It was really helpful to highlight specific triggers for me, and that moves on to another positive, which is improved mental health, because a lot of the time I would be getting really overstimulated, or I was just feeling unhappy because I was trying to treat myself like I was a neurotypical person, which I'm not, and then getting really frustrated at myself anytime I couldn't meet what I thought I should be doing. And so for me, that understanding of myself really enabled me to put less pressure on myself and less pressure on myself to be perfect, or worrying whether or not I said something right, or worrying whether or not people understand me or not. Understanding myself and my triggers more has really helped me improve my mental health, because I can feel myself getting overstimulated now, and instead of getting to the point where I'm really, really close to having a meltdown or just a breakdown or just feeling awful physically, I can remove those certain triggers. Not always, obviously. I mean, with sounds, you can't control all of the sounds that are going to be around you, but with light and stuff like that, I can turn the lights off, or I can just go under the covers or something. And even with the hearing sensitivity, you can, you know, put headphones on and stuff like that. So just understanding myself more has enabled me to not get to breaking point so frequently, and it still happens, but I'm learning a lot more about myself and trusting myself more, which is really, really nice. This leads me on to my next point, which was getting a diagnosis really has just enabled me to be a lot more myself. I've been masking my whole life, and I think getting a late diagnosis was actually a really beautiful opportunity to just let go of all of the expectations I have of myself socially and how I should be, which isn't exclusive to autistic people. Another thing with getting an official diagnosis was that I felt a lot more comfortable to reach out to people in the autistic community. You don't need a diagnosis to do that, and if you just want to identify with being autistic even though you don't have a diagnosis, that's fine. A lot of people who are autistic don't have a diagnosis, but for me, I just felt a lot more comfortable talking to other autistic people and talking about my experience being autistic, having my actual diagnosis. I think if you're someone who can talk to people, like I say, a lot of people won't believe that you're autistic, and getting a diagnosis doesn't necessarily ensure that they will believe you, but having medical backing behind you is a lot more tangible than just saying I did some tests online kind of thing. Again, if you're happy with that, that's fine. That's all I had up until I had an official diagnosis, and I'm not any more autistic now because I have the diagnosis. I just feel more comfortable talking about it. A big positive that comes with an official diagnosis as well is just more help bureaucratically. Official systems can actually help you. So at university, if you want disability support, you do need to have a diagnosis to get that support. That can also open up funds if you need different software or different laptops. Another thing you'd be able to access would be disability benefits, which is an important thing to consider because the amount of people who are autistic and unemployed is quite high, especially in comparison to neurotypical people, because obviously it's quite difficult for us to fit into the average workplace or like a desk job or something, but also the job market is just fucked at the moment anyway, so I think a lot of people are gonna need benefits. So is it worth getting a late autism diagnosis? For me personally, I think it was worth it, but it really is dependent on your lifestyle, whether or not you need disability support, and there's just a whole load of things to consider, and you don't necessarily need to have a diagnosis to apply things that might be helpful, such as strategies that work for people who are autistic or identifying your triggers. I think with anyone, diagnosis or not, it's constantly going to be a journey of trying to navigate the world around us and trying to make it more friendly for us. But I do think what a diagnosis and assessment can offer you is just making the path on that journey maybe a little more clear. It's like having a map. You still have to go on the journey, you still have to figure out where you're going to go, but you have a map now. Anyway, I hope that is helpful for anyone who is kind of wondering about getting an autism diagnosis. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down below. And yeah, I will try my best to answer them. I'm aware I wouldn't have covered every single question that you might possibly have on this topic. And I'm not saying I'll be able to answer every question you have. I'm just kind of sharing my experience of getting a diagnosis. And yeah, I'd really like to make more videos on autism and just talking videos in general. I used to vlog a long time ago. Even when I was in primary school, I used to vlog, and then I stopped doing it actually because I got really paranoid that I wouldn't mask well enough on camera and that people were watching it and maybe getting a different interpretation to what I was trying to put out. And yeah, basically part of not masking is I want to do YouTube. I enjoy doing this. The only reason I wasn't doing it is because I've just been terrified of doing something wrong or looking stupid or looking uncool, but I don't give a fuck. I really am not bothered at this point. I just want to be myself and do what makes me happy, and I like making videos. I think they're fun to make. I'm also hoping it will help me with my confidence a bit because she needs some work. Oh. I'd really like to be making more videos on autism, so again, if you have any ideas or topics that you would like me to explore, please leave them down below. And yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. Please feel free to subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this, if you would like to see content that isn't like this. I'm not gonna put myself in a box. Which is funny because I'm in a kind of box right now. Well, it's a rectangle, isn't it? But anyway, in conclusion, I shall see you when I see you. I always promise I'm gonna upload, and I do actually want to be uploading now, so I'm not saying I'm not going to, but I always promise I'm gonna upload on a specific time, and it never happens, so I'm not making promises. I'll see you when I see you, which I hope is soon. Bye!